Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Cyberside Chats. We just got back from the Rocky Mountain Information Security Conference in beautiful Denver, Colorado. And I am joined today by the amazing Todd Stewart, who was down there at the conference with me, gave an amazing talk on stage. Overall, I'd say we had a pretty good time, but I figured we'd take a little bit and just talk about what we learned at that conference. It was their 20th anniversary, so kind of a big deal for them. But, what were the overarching themes? So, Todd, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, happy to have you here. So, tell me, what did you find unique about the conference, just as a general event that we went to?
First, I want to give a shout out to the city of Denver.
Oh,
Everybody
yeah.
was great there. Fantastic city. I hadn't been there about 15 years, and I loved it. It was great. But as far as the conference goes, they have a beautiful conference center. It's gorgeous and it's huge, and they made great use of it. And really, when I walked in there, I thought, "Am I attending an AI conference?" Because AI was everywhere.
It
Everywhere.
was. Yeah, I heard that. I heard that from more than a couple of people when we were just kind of walking around the expo area, or talking to people after our talks and after our sessions. It really did feel a lot like an AI conference, not just in the fact that everyone was talking about AI, but it just kind of natively made its way into about every talk, every theme, everything that people were doing.
Yeah.
There was talk of agentic AI in the SOC. There was state level AI regulation. We did a deepfake AI tabletop.
Yep.
It was literally everywhere. So, Todd, when we're talking about the AI and the influence on the conference, were there any consistent themes that you picked up on?
You know, when we were talking about this, coming back, I think one of the biggest things is the evolution of should we use it to how are we going to control it?
Right, right, yeah.
I think a lot of people are trying to figure out they want it in their environment. And sometimes I think that they want it because they think they need it and haven't really done a use case if it's going to help. But that aside, because it's coming so quickly, I think we really saw a lot of people talking about how are we going to kind of put the brakes on it.
Right. Yeah. The where do we stop it angle took some interesting turns in conversation. And the audience at this conference was great for that kind of discussion. We had CISOs, we had IT leadership, engineers, auditors, compliance professionals. There was a whole wide variety of people that had their own thoughts, opinions, and even war stories about dealing with AI in the enterprise.
Yep.
I remember asking in my talk how many people had a non-technical role in their organization, and had like a good number of hands pop up. So
Yeah, that surprised
fact
me.
that yeah, it was kind of cool. There were this many people that were interested in cybersecurity that they would go to a conference where a lot of the stuff that we were going through was fairly technical. So kudos to them as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the circuit breaker. I think that was a big thing. So when I talk about the circuit breaker, we're talking about agentic AI, autonomous AI, using AI for incident response and forensics. But
Mhm.
what happens when something goes wrong? So, what are your thoughts on that, Todd? What did you learn about what happens when AI goes rogue as we were, hanging out down in Denver?
Well, you've got to have a plan B. You have to really
Yeah.
know what's going on with your environment, how AI is being used, what it's producing, and what it can touch. You really need to go through the due diligence to understand the impact, the potential impact of something going wrong. It's always great when we hit that prompt and we get that amazing answer. But what happens when it does it? What happens when it makes something up? Or what happens if it's agentic and it makes a rogue move? If you don't know your environment well, you're going to have some problems.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. When we talk about AI doing or kind of going on its own path, I think one of the best examples, and this one came up a few different times, was when we were talking about something like Pocket OS. Which
Yep.
for those who haven't heard our podcast from a few weeks back on this, they Pocket OS was using Anthropic's Claude engine for some testing. And it was able to, during its testing workflow, find a basically a universal API key, and then it deleted their entire production database, even though it had been specifically instructed very, very explicitly not to do anything like that. And they ended up having to it argued with them for a little bit. They had to go through and essentially convince Claude that it had made a mistake, and it finally fessed up to it. But it took a little while for that to happen, which I thought was a really good story to bring into play when we were talking about things that can go wrong. And like on that note, we also heard a lot of talk about things like shadow AI. So there, we got to see it get its own kind of governance
Right.
framing in a couple of the talks where they were talking about employees writing agents and coding assistants and putting them into production without approval. And again, that is not anything new. I mean, we have plenty of clients that have that problem happen. But Todd, I mean, what's the solution to that? How do we get people mostly to understand what the risk is and then to just stop doing it?
Boy, that's a great question because that's a challenge that we face in cybersecurity overall is the human factor, the human
Right.
portion, getting people to understand that their actions have consequences. You've got to have strong governance set up and, you've got to give people, if people are going to be doing this, you've got to give them the right skills. Make sure you've got your governance set up, make sure if you're going to be vibe coding, do you have at least vibe coding guidelines? Are you taking an enterprise approach to this? Or are you just letting people kind of run rampant in your environment? You've really got to kind of initially get it locked down, give people the skills to be able to do it right, and help them understand that what they're doing will ultimately impact their organization.
Right. No. So one of the analogies that I got to hear down there once, and I had to make a note of it because I had to throw it out here in our podcast today, was the way that AI has kind of evolved over the last few years, and it makes me wonder about like auto manufacturers, like when the first cars were being designed. When was it that the emergency brake was originally installed? Was that
Good
like
question.
yeah, it wasn't there, right?
Oh,
So the quote that I heard was the entire industry, both cybersecurity, technology, anything that has an AI integration to it. They spent all of 2024 asking if AI could actually do the job, and then they spent 2025 letting it try to do the job, and then in 2026 they finally realized, wait, we need an emergency brake for this.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean the autonomy's here. I mean, we're now over. It's who's holding the leash at this point? Is AI doing it itself, or are we keeping track of this?
I'm leaning towards AI right now.
I would think so. One of the other big trends that we saw down there was AI getting its own local and specific
Yeah.
regulations. So, like Colorado by itself has a couple of new things that it's focusing on as far as technical implementation details. It's not necessarily like legal theory, but we're starting to see individual states, individual organizations starting to put their own restrictions on how things can be run using AI or run through AI. And that's when we talk about things like, if I'm using Claude or if I'm using Anthropic's, platform for coding, I mean, where's my data actually go? And
Right.
of course, I mean, when I use it, I usually go through Bedrock. But if somebody is just picking up, a Copilot agent, or if they are just jumping into some random AI on the internet, what are we actually doing to safeguard all that? And can you audit where that data was? I mean, can you even audit AI was literally the name of one of the sessions that we saw down there. And I mean, unfortunately, I think for a lot of people, the answer is kind of no. I mean, what are your thoughts there?
No, I think you're spot on. I think we're dealing with something that's kind of a black box right now. And you mentioned the terms of service. I was reviewing the terms of service for Claude for something else earlier this week, and there are certain requirements for certain industries that have to have human in the loop authentication for what the
Sure.
AI is producing. And I think a lot of people are skipping that basic foundation of understanding how the tool can be used and what it's being used for, and just using it. And I think that's creating a tremendous amount of risk for organizations.
Right. Yeah, one of the big takeaways that I got from people was, I mean, we heard like a lot of kind of reactive talk when it came to how people were going to implement their AI policy and how they were basically going to plan ahead for the way that we're using and integrating with these tools. And I mean, if you're waiting for the federal government or federal law to start giving you guidance on this, some of the states just lapped you. Like
Yeah.
that's just exactly how we saw it happen, and that's causing some confusion for people. Like if I use AI and my data comes from New York, is that the same way that I can use AI with data that comes from Kentucky or somewhere like that, or Colorado in this instance? So I think we'll want to keep an eye on that. The AI Act is kind of an interesting way of looking at how people are tired of waiting, and
Mm.
they're seeing this opportunity to go ahead and make their own changes in policy.
Yeah. And I think they recognize the risk, which is why they're doing
Yeah.
that. I think that they see potential danger and want to get their hands around it.
Oh, no, absolutely, and I think it's really important that they do. This is a broader conversation that needs to be had, and I think conferences like this where we get that mix of people in the room, I think tend to be a great kind of melting pot for different opinions and different thoughts, and again, like firsthand experience with how these tools actually function and
Yeah.
what the real risk is when we use them.
Yep.
All right, well, we okay. So Todd, I'm gonna put you on the spot here.
Okay.
we did a tabletop, but you did a whole session on tabletops themselves. So I want you to I was really impressed by this. I want you to give a quick description of the talk that you did because I thought it was pretty amazing.
Well, thank you, Matt. I really appreciate that. And coming from you, that's a huge compliment. So my talk was on conducting tabletops can be a skill. We tend to treat them as a capstone event, and then we get all the findings, we go away for a year, and we revisit. I actually use Kung Fu as a metaphor because it's a disciplined, structured way to learn something. And I think that there are things that teams can do in between that capstone event that can help keep that team's blade sharp and that keep it at the front of their mind of what they need to do when the real stuff happens. Because
Right.
making a decision under pressure is one thing if you think you can do it, but have you done it? Have you had that stress inoculation? Have you had a live event? Have you gone through something that really, your heart rate's up, you're worried about what you're doing? Have you been able to replicate that and access that skill under those conditions? And so my talk was really about taking a proactive approach to preparing in between in between tabletops to keep your team sharp, as well as ensuring that your team has a lot of representation and participation from everybody on the IRP plan. Very often I see people, the senior people carrying the room, which I get, but they're making their team smaller by not allowing their junior analysts to get in there and make decisions and build a catalog of things that they can do under stress. And so really it was about team building and approaching things in a disciplined manner.
I thought that was a really interesting take on it too. And what I learned from that is that Todd knows kung fu, so that was fun too.
Yes, yes. Todd does, yes.
Well, I know. I mean, your section about getting the quiet people involved and making sure that everyone has a voice in those exercises and making sure that everyone knows what they are supposed to be doing in a real cybersecurity incident was big. I mean, even in our tabletop session. And this is pretty normal when you have a room. I think we had like 40 people in there for
Yeah.
the tabletop. But I mean, there's that certain group of people who are going to answer every question. They're going to have something they want to say at every twist and turn in the road, and that's fine. But there's also some other people in there that are just quietly contemplating, and you can tell that they're running the data and they're doing, the calculations in their head, but they're oftentimes, maybe not comfortable enough to speak up, especially in front of a group of peers.
Yep.
And so getting people involved in that kind of mindset, I think, is incredibly beneficial because I mean we've seen it with multiple other people. We have amazing elements and members of our team, and we have this huge depth of knowledge that can be utilized. But we have to get them to come out with it a little bit, right?
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed.
Perfect. Okay, so quick hits and trends. Let's hit this, and then we'll jump into some takeaways here. So, trust and infrastructure anxiety. So we had a few. We couldn't go through any cybersecurity conference without hearing a little bit about post quantum computing and the threat landscape and how public key infrastructure is on the brink of defeat and all of that stuff. Did you get that impression? Like, are we just totally hosed when it comes to post quantum and losing access to public private key encryption?
Well, to use a AI term, it's very much a doomer feel. Yes.
Yeah, it does kind of feel that way, doesn't it?
It is going to feel that way. Yeah.
All right. And then, so CMMC, and Todd, you're the advisory expert here. So you want to talk a little bit about CMMC 2.0 and how that seems like what a lot of people were asking about, because there seems to be some uncertainty about it.
Yeah. It looks like in November, there is a government requirement to get everything certified. And it's going to be tough for that to mean. A couple of gentlemen I spoke with there mentioned they could foresee the government extending that deadline, but the need for CMMC right now is huge. There's a lot of people out there looking for help, and the defense supply chain is a big surface. So it's going to be interesting to see if the government actually does move that pole, because people are going to have a hard time making it. And then when those contracts get cut off, there is a domino effect across industries.
Yeah, no, I think that'll have a huge impact. And again, that was a side conversation that we heard a lot of people
Yeah.
having just walking around the conference.
Yep.
There's confusion about it. There's uncertainty. So
Yep.
hopefully we get some answers here soon. Until then, we just kind of have to keep moving forward. Another big one that I saw that didn't really get discussed a whole lot because I mean, again, AI was the poster child for most of the conversations and talks that were going on, but that was about the human element, and I think this got touched on during our session, and it was something that was discussed, but it was kind of the quiet grind throughout the conference, and that's the attrition in the technology industry. And I think a lot of that has to do again with AI headlines. There was a figure from one of the sessions that said that there's a 31% attrition figure that comes as attributed to just burnout. Now, again, not my statistic, but I mean, I would believe it if you told me that. So I think that was the big one. I don't know. Any other thoughts you have on the overall conference? I thought it was great.
I thought the conference was outstanding. I really enjoyed it. I wish I'd been able to attend the social engineering one, but we were doing our tabletop at the same time. So
Right.
hopefully
Yeah.
they'll do it again someplace. But I was really impressed with everything. Everybody that I went to see speak was fantastic. I learned quite a bit, which I really enjoy. Got to meet Graham. That made me happy. And
That was pretty fun. Yeah.
that was fun. It was a great conference. And I was very pleased that LMG was represented so well. We enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Also, if you were down at the conference and you saw us, kudos to Nate Christoffels, our great business dev manager, because he
Yep.
manned the booth and handed out shot glasses to everyone that he saw. So we love that guy.
Yeah, oh
All
yeah.
right, let's jump into our takeaways for leadership here. So the big ones that I got were these. So you need to put a leash on AI before it needs one. So if you're deploying agentic AI for either your SOC, business workflows, or anything like that, we need to know where the kill switches exist. We need to know what escalation thresholds look like. And that human in the loop approval becomes so important because we have seen more than once now that if you just leave AI to its own devices, things can go wrong. And it makes it really, really difficult to come back from. I don't know, Todd, you have thoughts on that one?
I think you're spot on. I don't think I could say it any better, Matt.
Perfect. Next up, we want to make sure that we're inventorying our shadow AI, and we've talked about this in a couple of different podcasts up to this point. But when you're talking to your employees about what AI systems they're actually using, the way that I found that I get the best response from anyway is to simply ask, like, what AI tools do you need to get your job done? Like, what is it that you think you're going to need to be able to move forward efficiently? Don't just ask what AI they're already using, because that's how we wind up with shadow AI.
Yep.
Without that, though, it becomes really difficult to see where your risk actually sits. So run a discovery and do it this quarter. Like, make sure you are on the ball with this one. The sooner you get your arms around that, and the sooner people know that this is actually being audited, I think the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, no, the next one that I want to bring up here is AI regulation. So right now, I would say treat AI regulation as a state level problem. And this is especially important for organizations that are working with state agencies, especially when we talk about utilities or communications or things like that. The Colorado AI Act updated CCPA audit requirements. I mean, those were really front and center in a lot of the talks. If you're worried about it, I would take just a peek at which state laws touch your operations and make sure that you've got ownership of those. And waiting for the federal government, I probably wouldn't wait for the federal government at this point. I don't know. Am I being too doom and gloom about this?
No, don't ever wait for the federal government. No.
Perfect. Next, and again, this was our entire session, but deep fakes. Make sure that you are exercising how to deal with something like a deep fake, whether that be voice, video, really whatever other combination we can come up with before it actually happens to you. More and more that we're seeing voice cloning being used for phishing attempts. We're seeing video cloning now becoming a lot more common. So make sure that, especially if you deal with finance, or you're the person in your organization who has like the keys to the safe, make sure that you know verification protocols and don't find yourself in a bad situation. And then I think our last one here, and this is what I just hit before we started the takeaways, but when you budget for retention of your employees, not just recruitment. So with that big 31% figure, the phrase or the quote that I got out of this one was, the cheapest hire is the analyst you don't lose.
Oh, that's a good
If
one.
you're constantly having to redo your staff, bring new people in, retrain people, all of that is a drain on resources, on available time, and it generally just kind of a downside to dealing with a larger work staff. So make sure that you are keeping your people up to date, keeping them happy, and don't turn it into an HR problem when people continuously leave. That
Agreed.
makes sense.
Yeah,
Sweet.
agreed.
All right, Todd. Well, thank you so much for joining me on Cyberside Chats today. Any closing thoughts about the conference or anything else that we picked up here over the last week?
No, thanks for having me. I always enjoy talking on these podcasts, and very happy that the conference went well. And I'm glad LMG was able to make a little bit of a mark there. And Matt, personally, I really enjoyed your sessions. They were just fun. And so,
Well,
anybody out there, go see Matt.
we try to keep it pretty lighthearted, but I appreciate that, Todd. Thank you so
Of
much.
course.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks again for joining Cyberside Chats this week. We really appreciate you tuning in and listening, and we will see you next time.